everybody. Good morning. I hope that you had a great weekend. So we are now going to go into deeper and deeper in our research design, where specifically we are going to be looking at on how you can formulate your research design. We have already looked into the introduction of research in week 1, followed by the 7 hallmarks of research, where you looked at what is applied research, what is basic research, what was the deductive, what was inductive, what was qualitative, as an overview. Basically, in week 1, you learned a lot of the foundation of research. Following that, when we came to week 2, we looked at how you can do literature review and how critical literature review is. And after that, we slowly moved into defining research problem and trying to create theoretical framework and hypothesis development, where we looked at the 4 variables and the 4 hypothesis development. Now that you know all the basics of creating all these things, we are going to go into deeper, but trying to look into how now you can plan your research. So trying to create this research design is where now you're going to be looking at and planning, how am I going to collect my data? Okay, so I'm going to stop here for a bit so that you can have the decision, so that you can have an idea on what this proverbs means. He who fails to plan plans to fail. What do you think of this? Isn't that so true? If you don't plan your research, then you are in a way planning to fail. Research is a process. Okay? It's done in a process. That's why our class is structured in a process. And if you keep it all the task and decide to only do in week 12, then probably you're planning to fail, I would say, because you cannot finish all the tasks that you need to finish and submit in week 12 in 1 week. Research does not work like that. You do need to plan. I hope that you have a plan, and when you plan your research, you get good solid research out. You get to write, you get to articulate what you need to do. And you need to remember you also have to plan for your data collection. Okay? Now that you have made so much of effort in trying to define your research problem, in trying to conduct a critical literature review, in trying to document your literature review, and at the same time arriving to develop your theoretical framework and hypothesis. I hope that you are documenting your literature review because it's really important for your discussion chapters, and not only that, you are able to track where your literature is coming from and what the past research has done. So now you have to keep going, keep working, don't stop, and you will arrive at success. Okay, is we're going to be looking at 3 areas. One is you're going to be looking at research design. So by the end of the lecture, you should be able to explain what research design is, and then we're going to be looking at how you can look at some research design strategies that we have and develop the right one at the right time. Apart from that, you're also going to be given an understanding on what available research strategies is. What are they available for? Okay, now I'm going to bring back now to you to recap. If you're still struggling looking for a potential topic, okay, or you have some ideas, okay, but you don't know how to move forward. First thing is that put the potential topic, write it down as a group, just discuss with them and look at the potential topic that you have, right? So in here, my topic is that what are consumer attitudes towards paying online streaming services? So this would be my IB. So this is what I want to be looking at, what kind of attitudes they have. And this would be my DB, because I want to be seeing what are they attitudes when they pay for online streaming services. So now if you have this clue, Okay, I think I want to do this, but what should I do next? So look at the keywords. So now you look at the keywords that are coming out from the topic. Consumer, attitude, online, streaming, movies. That's it. Using these keywords, go and start your literature review. Okay? And from there, you move forward deeper and deeper. Okay, now I have another example. Here, we are now going to go and try to define what the problem is and how you can develop your research question. Okay? Please have a read at this scenario, because this scenario is going to help us into the next discussion that we're going to. So I'm going to give you a few minutes to read it. Okay, I think that's sufficient. So now you understand the scenario. It's talking about winter sports and how it can be a motivation to UK resident to participate in the winter sports. So these are the areas that the student wants to study. It could be your research project as well. You do not need to do winter sports. You can study maybe football, some kind of event that you are interested in for even students. So this is just an example, right? So from that, you should be able to identify the problem statement. That's really easy. The problem there, it was clearly stated that you want to explore the motivation of the UK resident participating in winter sports. Why? Because, there wasn't much data, so forth and so on. So from that problem, you are actually going to now start creating your research questions, correct? So this would be your research question. The problem could also be your research objectives here, depending on how you write. If you write to explore the motivation, then that would be your research objective, and the problem would be looking at why you want to study the objective, right? So it could be two ways if the angle that you're looking at. So I thought I might say that to you. So from that, you're going to create questions. So please look at this. This is an high order question, and another high order question is why. It's how. How and why are high order questions. When you do how and why, you are able to articulate yourself in your discussion. That means you're opening to a higher order analysis as well. So something for you to think upon when you start doing your own research questions and research objective. All right, now. So this is again to remind you how research works. Okay, it's all about planning, and the planning will reflect on your stages in research. So we have already now done 1. We have also moved to 2. We have also coming into 3, which I hope that you've already defined your problem. That means you've already defined your problem statement and your research objective. Now that you have that, I hope that you are currently now at this stage where you're trying to define your theoretical framework and moving forward to create your conceptual framework, which leaves us very timely with this research design. So you can start looking at your research design, and the coming weeks we will go deeper and deeper into the remaining steps. Okay, so today we're specifically going to be looking at scientific research design. So now my question is, what is research design? Name sounds nice. Name sounds interesting. It sounds like I'm going to have some kind of cupcakes. So that's why I put a picture of cupcakes anyway, to give you some motivation. Research design. Just like culinary students. How do you create a cupcake? You need to know what are the ingredients, correct? You need to know the steps. You need to know the process. For event students, how are you going to create an event? You need to know what kind of event, where you want to have it, who are the audience, How is the security going to be? Is there any VIP? Do I need any VIP protocol for it? You have your own process. And how about hospitality? Let's say you're working in front desk. You will have your own process, correct? How do I say hello to a customer when he comes and approach me? What do I say? How do I even operate the Opera software? You all have some form of process that's taking place in one specific activity. So to research, you have a research design to help you say how you're going to conduct your research that you have planned. So research design is basically a blueprint, a plan for your data collection, measurement and analysis data created to answer your research empirical question. So it is your blueprint, it is your guide, it is your framework. How are you going to achieve the questions that you have posed before this? Alright, so that's simple. Now we're going to go into deeper. That's the definition of your research design. Simple. Even a house, when you build a house, you need to have a research design because you want to know how you're going to achieve it. So that's exactly what is going to happen when you start creating your research design, which will begin in your chapter 3 named as methodology. Alright? So when creating your research design, you need to know whether it's a time-based. What's the time you have? Like I said, research can be based on your own time. What is it that you have? Okay, so in this class, you already know ahead because I have given you the time frame that you need to do. Look at your research question then. How are you going to answer all these things based on the knowledge that the time that you have and the questions that you have? And next thing, making sure that the methods that you pick and the information sources that you want to ask, let's say if you want to interview or you want to distribute question and you want to do an observation, you need to have the plan before, and research design will help you do that. And you also need to be looking at the specific frameworks among the variables so that you can create the plan accordingly. Okay, dokie. So now, again, bringing you back to ground you back to 12 steps of research, because now you need to determine your research approach and research design in a way that's your research design, your blueprint, your guide that you want to do. Okay? So when you write your chapter 3, you are going to be looking at all these variables inside. You are going to be looking at what research strategy. How much are you going to be interfering with your respondent? What is your study setting? Who are you going to be interviewing? What is the time horizon? So these are the things that we are also going to be covering today. Alright, so what are the elements of research design? Like I said, it's a process. So let's say if you want to relax and have a bath, you need to have essential oil. You might want to run hot water and you might want to run a candle so that you can have a good bath and relax yourself from a heavy day that you have had. Same thing. Like I said, research design is a blueprint. So you do need to plan how you're going to get the data that you want to do. So we will be looking into these elements accordingly. So first we're going to start by looking at what is the research strategies, and then we will look at the extent of your researchers, you as a researcher interfering with your subject, what are the study setting, what are the population, and what are the time horizon that you have. When we look at research strategy, it's also going to be interlinked little bit as an overview on data collection method, but we are going to go into detail on scaling, sampling design, and we have specific days, specific lectures covering on data collection as well in detail, qualitative and quantitative design that we are going to do. So when you do a research design, first thing foremost, there is no design which is superior than one another in any circumstances. So you as a researcher, you need to make the wise decision. You need to make a suitable one that will suit your problem that you have in time, right? So always take into consideration your research objective, your research question, what are your constraints, and if you have the time, data, or access even to money in some matter for you to conduct your research. Okay, taking all this into consideration, now we're going to look at the strategies that you have. Okay, first, we are going to look at deductive strategies. Deductive strategies usually would tend to be focusing more on quantitative research. Like I said, deductive strategies will move from a very general perspective to a very specific perspective. I just gave you time that to think. Alright, so when you do deductive strategies, it begins with a hypothesis and research question, and then you look at precise procedures for your data collection and analysis. So we are being very objective here. So some of the strategies that we have is survey using telephone interviews where you call and talk to them, or you also can use telephone surveys. You can also lab experiment, field experiment, quanti experiment. But the famous one is always research survey. You also have experiment survey which you can do, okay, but this is commonly used. Experiment survey is more when you want to test, you use that when you want to test a causal relationship between variables. Experimental survey, experimental design are often less useful when you're trying to answer exploratory or descriptive research questions. As such, a survey research will become much more appropriate because it's a system that allows you to collect information from and about people to describe, compare, explain their attitude, knowledge, and behavior. This is really popular, especially in our field of research, because this is what we are studying. We are studying human behavior, and we want to be also looking at data that we want to collect in this field. Alright, and survey research will also allow you to do applied research context, and just because you're doing survey, that doesn't mean you cannot collect qualitative data. You can, because survey allows you to collect quantitative and qualitative data, and it's really common to use survey to collect data about people, events, and circumstances. For example, surveys are often taken into account subject of consumer decision making, consumer satisfaction, job satisfaction, information technology usage, so forth and so on. Popular surveys always self-administrated, which can be distributed under paper or online, and also you have structured observation where you personally go and talk to your respondent and ask them the question that you have in the survey. Okay, when I say qualitative data here, that's probably still hanging on you. You're going to ask me, how can I do that with survey? That's impossible because it's written. No, but you can give them open-ended questions which will allow you to collect qualitative data in word form. Okay, don't worry, we are going to go into detail on all this about interviews, structured observation, and self-administered questionnaire as the week comes by. Types of qualitative questionnaire-based surveys: you have household surveys, street, telephone, online, mail, site, captive group. So there are various surveys that has been going on. Recently, Malaysia has been distributing our own survey, which is the census. So that's a form of survey. So if you are living in Malaysia, you should be doing the census, which will give them a figure of how many citizens are still in this country and how many residents that we have. Okay, so you should try to go into the exercise. Alright, then now we have inductive method, whereby you're looking at more on qualitative research. Okay, so some examples of inductive research would be, of course, your interviews, because here you're using a lot of words, right? So that would be one form of interviews, would be your inductive research. It's loose structure, and because it's subjective, so it depends on your dimension of understanding to expand the question based on the answer that is provided. That's why I said you do need to have the skill of trying to understand human behavior, or trying to prompt a good communication skill when you go into this qualitative route of method. So some research strategies that you can use when you use inductive is participant observation, film, photographs, projection techniques, case studies, ethnography, grounded theory, expert interviews. So famous one would be focusing in these areas, okay, expert interview, document analysis, prospective, and kinesthetics. These are all really famous. Especially in our field, we tend to be looking at these three, but if you are in arts, then you might be looking at more, even participant observation is something that we do more. But if you're in arts, you might want to use photograph, film to analyze your research. But that doesn't mean that you only have to limit on this. You are open to do whatever which is suitable, like I said, based on your research question that you have. I'm going to go through just slightly into detail, but don't worry, we are going to go into detail everything as the week comes up. But since you are pretty much new to inductive, so I thought I better explain to you. In ethnographic, it's a research strategy where it has a root that relates to anthropology, right? Why? Because here you are closely going to observe, record, engage in the daily life of another culture. So the key word here is culture, right? You are trying to study another person's culture, then you probably end up doing an ethnography. And after that, you are going to write accounts of this culture, emphasizing the descriptive detail. So ethnography is really like a participant observation. It involves immersion in a particular culture of a social group that's being studied, observing behavior, listening to what is said in conversation, and asking questions. Why you want to do that? Because that will give you an ability to generate an understanding of the culture and the behavior of the social group from an insider point of view, right? So participant observation, like I said earlier, it's closely related to ethnographic, but the only difference is that different participants might have different idea about the exact relationship that happens between two, but the concept is pretty much same. For some, both ethnography and participant observation can be a research strategy that involves spending long time watching people and talking to them about what they are doing, thinking, saying, with the objective of generating an understanding of the social group that is understudied. Right, so that is ethnography. While you have case study, that's basic, simple. You are all meant to be an expert of case study now, I believe, because you are already doing a lot of case study in research. So case study is where you collect information of a specific object, event, or activity, such as a particular person, department, business unit, or an organization. And what you're doing is that you're going to give a clearer picture of the problem that one must examine in the real life situation. That comes from various angle and perspective using multi-methods of data collection. So that is case study. So that is where you're specifically looking at one specific object. While grounded theory, on the other hand, is a systematic. It's really systematic, right? Sets of procedure that you have that you can develop inductively, derive theory from data. So the aim when you do grounded theory, it should imply that you want to create a theory in the end. So what you do here is theoretical sampling. So where you have a process of data collection, generating theory, whereby looking at the analysis, jointly you collect, code, analyze the data, and decide what data to collect next and where to collect next in order to develop the theory. So this is really in-depth. So you'll have interviews, you'll have participant observation. You really must have multiple method in here, and you must have a good and constant coding system to be able to do your grounded theory. There's also action research. Action research is more practical and it's more problem solving in nature. And action researchers usually use that as a mean of searching into and changing another professional behavior. It ideally should be highly participate in nature, and it usually involves in examining the beliefs, values, and assumption that have contributed to the situation that has been examined. Okay, so if you want to do an action research, you probably have to look at this guy Levine. He has created 4 steps in it, and where you'll go by diagnose, investigate, plan, act, reflect, and evaluate. I'm not going to go into detail because we are going to have a specific chapter which is going to look into qualitative data analysis as well. Okay. So some of the method, like I mentioned, in-depth, re-interviews, focus group, observation, participant observation, biography methods, analysis of text, and ethnography. Okay, now you're going to ask me, I know all these are made available. Wow, I have so many research strategies. Oh my goodness, I am filled with abundance. I can do experiment, I can do survey, I can do observation, I can do case study, I can do action research as well. How are you going to implement? That's the question now. First thing, you need to look at how you're going to collect your data. There's 2 ways. One is monitoring and one is communication. Monitoring would be a survey. So you give out a survey. Now QR code has been a really important tool. So that would talk about your quantitative research here. And if you're doing a qualitative research, then you are going to be in communication. But like I said, that does not mean you cannot use communication when you use quantitative research. You can, depending on how you are doing your research. Okay. Now there are 4 main objectives. There are 4 main objectives of doing research. One is reporting, descriptive, casual, exploratory, and casual predictive. We're going to be looking at one by one. So when you're reporting, basically you're just going to look at past data, nothing more. Past data, that means you're just going to produce a secondary data. You're going to look at how much, who, when, what, where. That's about it. But you're just reading the journal articles. You're looking at past data that you can get from government, from journal articles, from case studies, and you're just reporting. That's no great. Remember in week 1 we talked about primary research and analytics. So reporting will come under the analytics. Now we move on, which is getting to the juicy bit, where you want to do a predictive descriptive study, which what we are all going to do. But instead of focusing on past, you are focusing on now. So you're asking, in this pandemic situation, if you're doing research, who was affected, how much, where, what, where, how can I do it, how can I improve it? That's what you are going to be looking at. As we move on, this is an example of descriptive research. So what you're going to be looking at is you're going to be looking at the population characteristic, the frequency of the characteristic, and you're going to discover how the association between these variables is being found. Okay, so a good example is a survey or even interviews by asking the right question. Next is you have causal studies. You have exploratory, where you ask questions like why, and how, but you are looking at now. Okay, and predictive, you ask what and why, but you're doing that in future. So you're trying to predict something that's going to happen in 10 years time or in 6 months time. Okay, I hope that was clear. Now we're going to go into detail by looking at the measurements that you have. Like I said, your deductive and inductive would relate with qualitative and quantitative. So you have these two measures, qualitative and quantitative. And we will be looking into details next week and the following week on how you can do sampling, how you can create questionnaires, how you can create your interviews. So you will be looking at measurement scales that we can use. Okay. So when we talk about measurement scales, there are single methodology and multiple methodology that you can use. So if you want to do survey, that might be single. If you use survey and interview, that will be multiple. So again, boiling down, if you want to do qualitative research, quantitative research, or a mixed method. Okay, we will go into details now as well. When you look at the research setting, this is where you are going to be answering the question, how are you going to be asking them the question? Study setting is really important. You have two types of study setting. One where you go to the field, okay? So that is where it's called non-contrived study, and this is what we normally like to do. So this is where you go to the field and try to get the data. That means you go to your respondent's place, not you ask them to come to you. While in artificial setting, that would be where you create a stimulation, a lab condition, or a field condition, but you have set up an artificial setting so that they can come and do the research in your area. So that will come under the circumstances of doing an experiment, because you want to try to establish a cause and effect relationship in an artificial environment, which is probably maybe you need it. And time dimensional is where I told you, you have to know how much of time you have. Cross-sectional, meaning you are going to focus in a specific group. Okay, so this is cross-sectional because you probably have 6 months to do a research. Let's say your RP1 is going to, your RP is going to be in these circumstances 6 months. And if you have years, like if you're doing PhD, then you can do a longitudinal study and specifically looking at one particular group. Okay, so here you can have slightly bigger, and then you can focus on one particular person or a group that you want to study. So cross-sectional study at single point of time, because you only can do between March to June, so that's it. Multiple cross-sectional happens when you have few points in a year that you want to study and you use different sample. That could happen as well depending on the stages of research that you have. And longitudinal study, you are using multiple points as well, but you are using the same sample over few years. So if I'm going to go today, let's say my research was done over 3 years of time, but I would have need to study the same group for the time period of 3 years of time. Let's say I pick a group of students from Greenwich University, and I have to follow that particular group until they graduate. So it has to be the same person that coming through for a longitudinal study, while if you do a cross-sectional study, you do not need to have that. So that's why you see most research would be in the area of a cross-sectional. Now, how much do you interfere with your respondent? That means how much are you going to be dealing with your respondent? That is really important because it is going to reflect your research ethic as well. When you have minimum interference, that means you are letting them to answer in their nature full of events that they are doing. When you have moderate and extensive, you are coming into the research in a bigger picture. This would happen when you do interviews, right? So when you do that, you have to remember of your ethics and how it needs to be done. Alright, moving on, we're going to move into deeper now, looking at who are you going to study? Is it an individual? Is it diets? Is it group? Is it organization? Or is it a culture? Unit of study refers to the level of how you want to study how in-depth that you want to do in your research. It doesn't matter, it's just your perspective of research to which your information that you want to analyze and conclude at the end of your conclusion. For example, if your problem statement focuses on how to raise motivation levels among students in general, then you will be interested in studying students in an organization and maybe to have to find out how they can raise the motivation. So as such here, the unit of analysis would be an individual. Okay, so that's an example. Why? If you are looking at diets, then you are going to be studying two. For example, you want to study husband and wife's interaction with their children, or you want to study subordinates and supervisors relationship, then you are doing two. If you move on deeper and deeper, like say if you want to study a group of 6, group of 7, then you particularly need to establish your research properly and understand how are these going to be done, especially if you're looking at group and if you're looking at diets and if you're looking at culture as well. Okay. A group of analysis could be an example where a manager wants to study a newly installed information system. So then you study the particular group who is using that new system. That could be an example. Alright, so now we're coming to almost an end. I talked about qualitative and quantitative research, correct? But I also have to inform you that you can mix both the method. So you can dabble between both. Because for some question you cannot just answer by looking at qualitative and quantitative research. You want to have in-depth analysis. As such, you will do a mixed method. Okay, so when you do mixed method, you are allowing that particular you as your researcher to combine your inductive and deductive thinking to solve the problem that you want to have. So like I mentioned earlier here, you can have interview with survey combined together and then you are running a mixed method. So again, no method is superior among each other. You have to pick a method that you want and you need to be able to justify why you want to do that when question is asked, because each research that you do, it's going to give you research different idea. When you do a deductive, you are mainly theory testing and theory validating, while if you do inductive, you're trying to create or look for a pattern in the theory. It boils down to what you want to do. And if you do mixed method, you are doing both. Okay, so timing is really important. So look at the timing that you have and then you can proceed this. Okay, now I'm going to ask you a question before I let you go. Ponder this. Why is it important to consider basic research design issues, okay, before conducting the research, even as early as the time you formulate your research design or your research question? Sorry, why? Ponder, ponder, ponder. That's because you want to make sure that the purpose of the study is done in an effective manner. You want to make sure what you're studying is what the absolute truth that you are getting. And of course, rigor is a really big thing in research, so you do need to make sure that you are having the rigor for research. And when you already think of this, now when you create your research question, you're already thinking, who should I ask to? How should I ask to? You are already making sure that you are not going to face any problematic issue. So that's why your research design is really clear. You need to be clear what you want to do and map it against your research objective. Alright, so we come to an end for our classes, for the lecture now, but don't think I'm going to let you go. You have to read and you have some tasks which I'm going to give you that you need to do. Okay, so now let's move on. The big question. How is your research going? Where are you at? Okay. So now you're going to be answering what is your research problem, what's your research objectives. I hope that's a tick. And now, like I said, why do you need to think? Because now you have to think how your research design or methods is going to be carried so that you don't face any problem. How are you going to gather your data? And what analysis will be used and who is going to do the analysis? Of course, you are going to be doing it, but the question is, you are going to be trying to looking at your reporting as well. Who is going to give you a report? So as a conclusion, research design is a blueprint of a plan for data collection, measurement, and analysis of the data created to answer your research question, issues relating to decision regarding your research strategy, the level at which the data will be analyzed, and the temporally aspects such as a time horizon are integrated part for your research design. Okay, so each component of your research design offers several critical points. As such, like I said earlier, there is no specific design that is superior in all circumstances. Instead, you as a researcher will have to make the choices and create a research design that is suitable for the job at the hand. You now as a researcher, like I said, as you are trying to make this decision, what type of research and who is going to do this data, who's going to analyze the data, you have to think all these things. You have to make the right decision to ensure that you are not only going to answer your research objective, your research question, but also considering the rigor that you desire and the practical consideration that you have. Okay, so now you are going to go into deeper this week's tutorial. So we are going to go for the library workshop where we are going to be looking at information search, which will supplement whatever information that you need, or if you have not done your literature review yet, I hope that's not the case. So we're going to go for this workshop, and this workshop will be done via Zoom, and I'll be posting the link in eLearn. So please click on the link that relates to your tutorial and join in the class, and I will meet you up there and we will have a good workshop together. Okay, so I have already in between given you some questions, and there's some questions which are coming in through, so you do need to answer all these questions before you can finish your tutorial, before you can finish your lecture and move on to your tutorial. Sorry. Alright, so in that case, I would bid you a good happy week and happy studying and happy researching. So have a nice day and see you soon.